Now that we understand about promises, let's have an example from callback function and then we convert it to promise. Let's say we have a function called getUser and it will take user ID, and there's a callback function console.log get user from database. So we will get the user information from the database. To simulate that, we will use the setTimeout, and the setTimeout will return the callback function that we have here, and the callback function will return us an object. And the object we will have user ID, and then username, let's say John. Let's give it 3 seconds of delay. We'll have another function called getServices, and it will take user. It will also have a callback function. We will say get user services for user, and then we put user dot username, let's say from API, and then so after 3 seconds it will return an array for us. The array will contain, let's say, TV service, phone service, and then internet service. After the 3 seconds it will return us this array. We are going to have another function as getService cost, and it will take service and it will have a callback function. We will say calculate service cost for the services. So this function will calculate all the expenses or the cost for the services that the user get. So here we will say in the callback function service.length times 100. So service.length, here we have 3 elements, so it will calculate the 3 times 100 and it will return the result. So let's call this function getUser. We will say getUser and we put 100 and the user ID. The getUser will take a callback function. The callback function we will have user, and the user will call the getService. The getServices will have service. The getServices will take user and services in the callback function. The service callback function will call the getService cost, and the getService cost will have the service and it will take another callback function. It's called cost, and the cost we will have console.log. Let's say the service cost is cost. Okay, so now let's run this function. It get user from database. After 3 seconds it get the service for the user John from the API, and then it calculate the service cost for the TV, phone, internet from the API, and the service cost is 300. So here we see that we have the nested callback function, and this is called callback hell. So as many as the callback function we have nested, that make the code very complex and it is very hard to debug. So now let's convert this to promise, and let's see how we can easily make this working. I'm going to copy this, and then let's comment this out first, and then we say, so I would like to make changes in the copy. In the promises, as I said, we don't have the callback in the parameter. The function will return a new promise. So we say return new promise constructor, and the new promise constructor will take resolve or reject. So it will either resolve or reject. Then here we can put our code. That's set timeout and console.log. We don't need the callback in the promise. We will say resolve. So if it returns the value, it is resolved. Let's change the next function as well. So we remove the callback, and the function getService will return new promise. The new promise will take resolve and reject. Okay, so let's cut this code here and put it inside the promise. Remove the callback and change it to resolve. Okay, let's do the last one. Remove the callback. Return new promise. And the new promise will take resolve and reject. It will either resolve or reject. Okay, so now let's put the code inside the promise. Okay, so here, in order to call the promise, let's remove this, and we say get user. We put 100, for example, the user ID, and then we say then get services. Once it called the services, then get service cost. Then we change that. We say then console.log. Okay, so let's run the function again. Get user from database. After 3 seconds, it gets the John from the API. After that, it calculates the cost. Okay, so callback function is not defined here. Let's see what is the problem in the code. Line 60. Okay, we forgot to remove this and put it to resolve. Okay, it should be good now. Get user from database, and then it got the John from the API. Now it's calculating, and the result is 300. So as we see that here, it looks very simple, and it's not nested like the callback hell that we had here before. This one is from the previous. Here it is. So as we see here, let me copy and put it side by side, and we can see the difference. Okay, so here we see the promise is much simpler and easy to work with, but here in the callback, here we have the callback hell. The promise was much easier. In the ES 2017, we also have async await, which is built on top of the promise, and it makes our job much easier. Okay, now let's use the async await. The async await will work like synchronously on asynchronous operations. So let's convert this to async await. So first let me comment this, and for async await I would like to create the function, and the function will say show service cost, and let's say let user equal to await. We say await, and then get user 100, and we say let services equal to await, and then we say service await services user let cost equal to await, and it called the get service cost. It will take service in the parameter services. Okay, finally we will say console.log cost, or we can say the service cost is cost. Okay, so let's run the function again. Okay, I forgot to put the async, so we need to put the async before the function. So here, to make this async await, we will need to say async, and then let's call the function again. Okay, I forgot to call the function. We will say show services, run the code, so it get user from the database. Okay, in line 74 what we have, okay, let's say services, so it get services. Okay, here get, we need to put the function name get services. Let me double check if it is this. Okay, let me copy that here. Okay, it should be good now. We have the cost await get services cost. There was a spelling mistake here. Okay, let's run the code again. At get user from database, and get service for user John. Calculate the service cost, TV, phone, internet, and the service cost is 300. So here we see that it looks synchronously, so it makes our job much more easier. So the async await is built on top of the promise. In the past that we used to work with the callback, and we had the problem with the callback hell, we no longer have the callback hell problem, and we use the async await or promises. So this was all about the promise, async await, and callback function. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching.